Hey, Wayne, can you hear me?
Hi, Susan. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, Justin, why don't we get started? It's 1 o'clock.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Justin Fiery from KMJ Consulting. On behalf of the I-95 Corridor Coalition, we'd like to welcome you to Building TSMO Performance Measures for Internal Performance Reporting and Public Dashboard Use. Everyone, just some housekeeping items at the start. This is a muted webinar, so feel free to type any questions you have in the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner. If you have any technical difficulties, you can press *0 to speak to an operator, or you can call Wayne at 609-970-2584. His number is also in the chat box. This webinar is being recorded, and we will have a presentation. We'll have the presentation in its recorded form, and slides will be distributed after the meeting. And with that, I'd like to introduce Denise Marco from the I-95 Corridor Coalition. Take it away, Denise.
All right. Hello to everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As you can see in front of you, here's today's agenda. I'm going to start with a brief overview of how we got to this topic, and then I'm going to turn it over to Eric Rensel from Gannett Fleming, who's going to open the discussion with a more kind of a brief overarching view of performance management. He's got a few slides starting with like why we do what we do and ending up with how we start with an objective and get to a balanced measure. After that, he's going to turn it over to Susan Klasen of New Hampshire DOT, who's going to showcase the New Hampshire program with its dashboard and its internal reporting. She's going to outline how they got started and its growth over the past 4 years. I think that you'll find that the biggest takeaway is not to get caught up all in the data and the measures, but to simply start, and that as you go along, the path forward becomes more clear, and I think you'll see that with the New Hampshire program today. And then we're going to turn to John MacAdam of Ohio DOT. He's going to talk about some of their existing measures related to their TSMO strategies, such as incident management or work zones or road and weather operations. And then he's going to outline their data warehouse project that aligns with the development of their TSMO dashboard. So for those of you who are looking for like how to do or how to start to plan for the process, you'll probably find his presentation very helpful. We will be monitoring the chat box for questions, and we'll look to answer any that appear at the end of each presentation rather than wait until the very end. So please feel free to type in your questions. You are in mute only, and we'll look to get them answered as we progress. And then at the end, we'll wrap up with any of the remaining questions that had not been answered initially. Okay. So as you can see, we have a large number of folks who actually have registered to hear the presenters. There are many different agencies here. We actually have 2 registrants from overseas, so I think we can officially call this an international event for the first time. But there's DOTs, turnpike authorities, MPOs, federal highways represented, and the universities, and we have vendors as well on the line. The coalition is sponsoring the webinar. For those of you who may not be familiar or who may be unfamiliar with the coalition, we work with 16 states and the District of Columbia all along the eastern seaboard. We work both corridor-wide as well as regionally and on issues that can improve TSMO strategies. Economically, the corridor is vital, I think, to the entire U.S. economy. So our overall work with the states really focuses on the mobility of the corridor. So before I give you a brief summary of the presenters, I just wanted to note that the webinar originated out of a strategic planning session where some of our regional leaders had requested that we develop a webinar on TSMO dashboards. But in doing the research, it's easier said than done because there seems to be very few out there that are considered TSMO-specific dashboards. States have department-wide dashboards that include congestion or asset condition, but trying to find truly TSMO-only metrics was a challenge. So we hope that you find this webinar helpful and informative today. Okay, so before we get started, here's a brief summary of the presenters. Eric Rensel, he is Vice President at Gannett Fleming. He specializes in what I call innovative approaches and strategies for ITS projects and TSMO operations. He's truly a subject matter expert in the area of performance management. Then we have Susan Klasen from New Hampshire DOT. After 7 years in the maintenance operations, she became the administrator of the department's TSMO Bureau, and she's responsible for the oversight of both the statewide operations program as well as the statewide TMC and all of the TSMO strategies that go with it. And then finally, John MacAdam, he's worked in operations at Ohio DOT for 13 years. He currently oversees all of the department's TSMO efforts, and those include obviously statewide TMC, TSMO programs like Safety Service Patrol and Traveler Information, weather management, performance metrics, and analytics. So that's your group today. So with that being said, I'm going to now turn this over to Eric Rensel.
Thanks, Denise, and thanks to the I-95 Corridor Coalition for inviting me to be part of today's presentation. This is something I do enjoy talking about whenever I get the opportunity, and when Denise first invited me to be part of this presentation, it reminded me about the work that we had done a few years ago, and it's great to see this progressing in New Hampshire, and it's also great to see some of the other work that's being done as well. So I'm a pretty simple guy, and I think that there are many great software solutions that help us compile our performance measures and even our performance management aspects that we come up with on the market today. And I think those are all wonderful products. You'll get to see and hear about some of them on today's webinar. But what I often find with my clients when I work with them is that sometimes the reason we're doing performance measures in the first place gets lost. Sometimes it's easy to get enamored with the graphs that we're able to produce, the pictures we're able to make our data into, and it causes us to lose sort of focus on why we're doing what we do. And so I recall when we first started to take a look at this in New Hampshire back in 2014, there was the same kind of questions, and some folks struggle to wrap their heads around exactly what it is we're trying to achieve with performance management. And so for that group, I kind of came up with this concept of some things we do are for internal purposes and some things we do are for external purposes. And I think having a good understanding about each of those helps us fashion our performance measures and ultimately our approach to performance management better. And so that's why I kind of came up with the term of corporate performance measures versus user performance measures. Really, we explored the idea of corporate versus public domain performance reporting as we did that project, and I've had an opportunity to do that for a number of clients since. And it really has helped clarify and simplify our approach to performance measures, because with our data capabilities today, with the amount of data points we're able to collect, it's easy to over-collect and over-report. I know I recently worked for a client that was reporting over 140 different performance measures. And as part of that work, we helped them actually reduce the number of performance measures they were using and tried to help them find better value in what they were doing. And so I think, especially as you look at the corporate domain performance measures, it's important to realize that even though we focus on outcomes, and you can't hardly go to a performance measures or management presentation and not hear people talk about outcome-based measures, and certainly we want to report those because it shows the value in what we're doing, but it's okay to report activity measures too, especially if you're just beginning and you're setting a baseline. What's important is to have a strategic direction then to move beyond those performance measures activities. And I think the bottom line on this one is don't allow your agency or yourself to become performance shamed. As you go to all these national conferences, as you participate in webinars, and they talk about how we need to be advancing things, don't be afraid to take the time to get the basic things right first. When we were going through the project up in New Hampshire, we were really trying to help people connect with the ideas. And I used to show a slide when I did presentations that talked about the terminology game. And some of what I would say is that people use the term performance measurement, performance metric, and performance management interchangeably, even though those three things are totally different, have totally different connotations to them. So I always find it most helpful to use examples from outside of our industry or outside of the topic of focus to help people more readily connect with the ideas that we're trying to explain and really help them understand the differences between those three terms. So in this case, we use the idea of Ty Cobb. For all of you baseball fans out there, Ty Cobb is widely recognized as the best hitter in the history of baseball. And so we went through an example that showed the differences between, slugging percentage and on base percentage and batting average as our method of describing differences in value between between different approaches. So I would encourage you as you're getting started, or even if you think you're mature and you're thinking of moving on to that next level, think about examples that you can bring in, simple examples from outside of your topic of focus that help paint the picture more clearly. So I'll just end with a couple of slides here that kind of demonstrate the results that we had from the work we did in New Hampshire. And so we took a simple one, right? Most people on the call today probably are involved in some way of either strategically thinking about the location of or designing or construction of dynamic message signs. And so in 2014, when we kind of finalized this work, we wanted to demonstrate how you could use one focal area and lead to measures that make sense on both the corporate side and the public domain, so that we weren't duplicating effort, we weren't asking for additional work to be done. We're finding different ways to give the data meaning depending on the context of who we were talking to. So we started with the strategic and SMART goals that you see on the screen here when it comes to dynamic message signs. And these are, you could probably find these in many strategic plans or many different agencies where they are focusing on performance measures and performance management. So then on the following slide here, you'll see what we did was take those SMART goals we had and develop them into actionable steps. And you can see that on the corporate side, we actually kind of broke that out into 4 different levels. We said there's things that people will do at the technical analyst level with that data. There's things we need to know from a maintenance perspective, and you can tell a lot of in the technical analyst and the maintenance realm are really focused on asset management rather, and trends and performance management we use to make sure the infrastructure we deploy is giving us the value and life expectancy that we thought we should get from it when we made the purchase, which is vitally important, especially now as many ITS devices, first or second generation, are ending their lifespan or life expectancy rather, and it's important to think about replacement of those. We also focused more at the management level, looking at, for example, the safety engineer level or the the program manager level, where we're focused more. You can see we're making that shift from activity measure to more outcome-based measures as we look at what those folks in those roles might use the information for to help make decisions, help make the business case for investment, and try to help make the justification for continued support of the program. So again, we're really basing this on one original SMART goal and one set of data that we're using in multiple ways to make sure we keep it simple, but also get the value we need from this effort. And then on the bottom of this, you can see how we intended to convert that to the public. And in our case, for that effort, we considered executive management on a high level to be needing the same kind of information that the public domain needs, not because we're seeking to keep anything from the executive level, more because at their level they are really seeking the basic information they need to, make high-level decisions. And then with a whole program of performance management behind it, like this laid out, there's the opportunities for them to drill into whatever depth or whatever level they thought they needed to. So my big takeaway I want to leave you all with today as I transition out here is that it's important to not make it so difficult that you can't get through, the easy questions. And in today's world with big data and lots of different cloud computing and cloud analysis, approaches, and the emphasis on performance measures and performance management, it is easy to get lost in the process and lose sight of what we're trying to actually to do. So I always advocate for keep it simple, do a really good job at the ones that you can do a good job with, show why they're valuable, and then increase in a logical way from there that still stays connected to your SMART goals that you're trying to achieve. So again, thanks to the I-95 Corridor Coalition for letting me be a part of this today, and I'll look forward to fielding any questions that happen to come in through the chat box. With that, I'll turn it back over to Susan.
Hi, this is Susan Klasen from New Hampshire. Eric, that was a great opening presentation for what I want to talk about, because as you'll see with New Hampshire, we're missing, the slide is not working. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not sure what happened with the slide deck, but New Hampshire started this in 2014. And in 2014, I'm going to walk through the years, really 2014 to where we are today, which is 4 years of really solid development. We, as Eric said, we started with just the activity measures. We started talking about just the first report that we even issued is just what we did, how many message boards we posted to and how many times, how many phone calls did we receive in radio communications in and out, how many weather notifications did we distribute, how many incidents did we do. And we walked through just what we did in 2014. It was that simple activity measure. And every month like the first month we just did straight raw numbers. The second month, the DMS times that we posted, we broke it out by the type of posting that we did. Was it a construction message? Was it for incident? So we broke it out little by little. Then in about the 9th month of our first year, we still were making very small incremental changes on just what we were doing, our activities. We started to refine the look of it. We started to take those activity measures and change them into some performance measures. One of the most important things, here we go. One of the most important things that we did in that 2014 year was we really used our operators to pull out these activity measures for us. And when Eric's opening slide talked about the users, he talked about confidence, value, and justification. That was huge for our own operations. Our operators who were the overnight shifts, the middle of the day shifts when they had time, they were pulling out manually the number of messages that they were posting, the types that they were posting. And that just provided the value to them of what they were doing. And towards the end of 2014 and into 2015, let me go back here. Into 2015, we did a full, 2015 was what we call the year of consistency. So in 2015, every month we posted a very similar looking document, and it was available on our dashboard. So people could go to tmc.com, and I think everyone can see this, and they would go and they would be able to pull every month exactly what it looked like. And the inside of the document would change little by little, but there was just that buy-in, the consistency, branding the TMC, if you will, branding our activity measures in 2015. Then in 2016, as you can see, we moved on to what we called the corporate measures, as Eric was talking about in 2016. So in 2016, we started to take a look at what those activity measures cost us. We were posting to message boards. We were reporting on activities with Service Patrol, but we weren't reporting on the costs associated with those. So that's really what the corporate quarterly started to look at. The corporate quarterly started to look at our reliability of our systems. So we knew we were posting to message boards and using cameras because we had documented that with our activity measures. But now we were looking, how much does that cost us? What is our uptime of those devices? Which devices are we using more than others? Kind of gets to what Eric was talking about towards the end of his presentation. We started that in 2016, and we had done that based on the state fiscal year. One change that we made is as you probably know, you have to do your federal reporting quarterly. So we changed a little bit of this to make the federal quarter and the state quarter, and we were very clear on if we were talking about the state quarter or the federal quarter, but instead of making two separate reports, we had it be one report. And we were able to use it for multi-functions. And again, what was really great for our internal people was we were still doing that consistent monthly measure. They were used to it. Now they were seeing this dollar amount that really went to just our internal DOT staff and FHWA. The costs were pulled from our cost tracking database, and some safety measures, those were pulled from Federal Highway. We have a great interaction with our local Federal Highway agency, so we were able to get good safety numbers from them. The 1201 compliance, those were really collected by the operators. So we explained to them how you have to do public notifications within certain time frames, so they understood the value of it. So they were trying to meet it. They would document it, and then at the end of the month, they would manually pull it out, and we would be able to put it in an Excel workbook, and they would be able to, one of our program specialists was able to create this report that looked pleasing to the eye, so it gained the confidence of the operator putting it in, and it was easy to read. So then we realized that over time, more and more, we had so many activities that we were doing and we were capturing, and we were transforming them into performance measures. But a lot of it was a manual effort done by our operators. So in September of 2016, we adopted a new advanced transportation management system that had some reporting capabilities. So in 2017, we used those reporting capabilities to automatically pull some of the reports from our ATMS. Good and bad. Great because it was a lot less manual effort. It was much easier for staff to go in and pull reports from an automated system. The downside was we had really built up the operators' justification, value, confidence in creating these. And now we are doing this task that they've been doing for 3 years and doing a great job at. We're now automating. So you have to balance that. So what is great about that for us is that just made us transition into 2018. So as we take a task from an operator that says, you used to report how many unplanned incidents for the month. You used to go through and count these. Now we have a push of a button to be able to do that. So we took that piece away, but now we're saying, okay, let's take it and look at secondary crashes. Can you go through and pull out some of that information? So we're teaching our operators to take these raw activities, we're automating it, and then trying to take them to a different level, thinking of secondary crashes now. So they still feel that value. And I can see something in the chat box here about, yes, we are one centralized transportation management center. We do have 6 districts that use part of our ATMS for log reporting that we can create reports from. But Transportation Management Center, the centralized one, is the one who posts the message boards and does the unplanned events. So it's easy for us to pull all of that information. The other piece that we started to do in 2018 is look at the user delay costs for areas of congestion. So we are looking at the travel speeds through different corridors. Sometimes it's for a weekend, sometimes it's during the week. It depends on the corridor. And we are taking the speed from our ATMS, the volume we are automatically now getting from our turnpike toll stations, and we are able to generate a user delay cost. So now I've rolled this out to our operators, and we're starting to say, okay, what can we do with this now? And by taking this out on the floor and having these conversations with them, they have really great ideas because they live this every day. The other piece that we are doing is at the beginning in 2014, we started talking about the number of ITS devices. And then I mentioned in 2015, we started looking when they were down, when they weren't functioning, what was the reliability. Now we have a work order tracking system where we are able to get average downtime for specific types of devices, specific makes, specific models. Right now, that is a manual effort, and that's something that in the future, we hope with a different work order system, we will be able to automate some of that. But that's good for us for now, just to take the ITS device reliability a little bit deeper. Some stuff that we're looking at in the future is, again, like I said, the improved communication between devices. We do have some state police CAD integration right now, but it is difficult to navigate and pull out certain information. So we hope to improve on that very soon. Again, the secondary crashes. Just today we had a crash event and it led to a secondary crash, and the operator picked up on that, which might sound like they should for some of you on the phone, but to understand what truly is a secondary crash and what is not, that takes some education and some time, and then how do you document that? And then how do you report on that? So we're going to try to take that the rest of 2018 and 2019 and look to see how we can better report on that. Automation, again, almost everything in our activity monthly measures is automated. A lot of it in our corporate quarterly is now automated, but we still need to refine some of that automation. I'm interested in reports on costs of contractors and state versus state employees. But again, I think that, as Eric was saying, as you can see for New Hampshire, it has been 4 solid years of working through this, starting with how many phone calls do you get? How many radio communications do you get? How many times do you type a message on a message board? Starting at that basic level is key to understand the data that you have. And then one thing just leads to another, because you have these conversations over the water cooler, on the floor, in a meeting, wherever, and you're like, oh, I wonder what this is, or how we can better perform on this or that. And it just but you have to know the data that you have and how to collect it. And again, New Hampshire's been very fortunate because we have been able to use, we are 24/7, 365 operation. So we are able to use operators and give them monthly tasks, and knowing that you never know what their day will be like. But if they have downtime, they know they have a task that they have to complete that month, whether it be the unplanned incidents or whatever their task is, and then they just get it done, because then at the end of the month, they get to see this report that shows their value. I think that is it. Does anyone have any questions before we move on?
Susan, I think there's in the chat box a question about were the challenges of being able to show operators the value of pulling that data.
Oh, thank you. So I think at the beginning there were some challenges with some of the operators. Fortunately, as the new operators came on board, it was just an expectation in their job. And what we do now is, if there's an operator that I can tell is interested in a particular item, then I really try to focus with that operator and be excited about it, animated about it, bring it to them. Hey, what do you think about this or that? Getting their buy-in then. But again, it's the operators, some of them, it's the ones that are new, that you can just, as soon as they join the job, you say, okay, this is part of your job function. The other advantage that I have or had was I became an administrator in 2016. So when you get into administration, a new administrator, it's pretty easy to say, okay, now you're going to do this, and just work that through with them that way. The other thing I should say is every time we send out, like the first time we did the user delay class, I sent that to our bureau-wide with the reason on why we did it and to show the value of that. Anything else?
I'm waiting for the chat. Well, there is one other question while I'm looking for in the chat box. On your dashboard at nhtmc.com, outside of TMC operations, which is where this data is located, there are some other options relative to safety, service patrol, I think. And can you elaborate a little bit on those on the website?
Let me go back to that slide. Could you see that when I open that, Denise? Can you see this?
I see the
your dashboard.
Slide. Yes.
You don't see the website?
No.
No. So when you go onto nhtmc.com onto our dashboard, there is a the months are all there from 2016 to 2018. We just go 3 years back. If anyone wanted it for the years before, we have it. But we also have on there the a safety patrol, and we have a link to the ITS devices, which just shows how many devices, and a link to the highway safety page, which talks about the New Hampshire driving towards zero, and that's that link that we have with Department of Safety and Federal Highway to be able to provide some of this information. So I do encourage anyone, if they can, to get on the nhtmc.com website, and at the bottom you'll see the dashboard page. And if you do, and you have any questions, feel free to let me know. So I'm just seeing the chat that says if I click at the bottom. So I did that, and it's taking me to a separate screen. So I don't think you can see that. But if you get a chance and you have any questions, please ask. Again, it's baby steps. It's small. It's starting with what you're doing.
All righty. There are a couple more questions, Susan, in the chat box as well.
Yep.
Someone asked, could you explain how devices would communicate with each other? I'm not sure.
Where do you see that?
Alex asked that question. Could you explain how devices would communicate with each other? Does that make
Alex, Alex, all of our devices through our ATMS system we can reach all of our devices through that system. So when we enter that system, we enter an event, say it's a crash. Through that system, they can view the camera, they can post a message to a message board, they can send out a tweet. So that's all through our ATMS, if that's what you mean. If it's not, type and elaborate a little bit more. But right now, everything is through our ATMS. And Nicholas, as part of these efforts, did New Hampshire change any of its processes for producing the data in real time for the public? In other words, were the efforts to improve the static dashboards combined with efforts to produce real-time data feeds for others who want to produce their own analysis? Nicholas, so let me just read this again. Did the New Hampshire change? So right now, I'm not sure, others who want to produce their own analysis, we have the travel time and the delays real time internally now, and we have them on our video wall. Can you hear me now? We have the travel times up on our video wall. We are producing those reports statically at the end of the week or the beginning of the week, depending on the corridor. Citizens, the public can get travel times from our 511 page in certain areas. Not sure if that answers your question.
All right, and we have Micah.
So
I'm sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, as your operators were doing an analysis role, how many operators did you have working on a daily basis, and what ATMS software are you using? So the number of operators varies. I think right now we have, I'll say 1.5 out there on the floor, and that's because we have one, and then we have the supervisor who is sort of in and out of meetings helping when he can because of vacations. We try to keep at least 2, but anywhere from 2 to 4. They weren't doing the analysis necessarily, but they were pulling the data from the logs and putting them on spreadsheets. So in the morning, they were getting the morning big construction and construction projects and morning commute. They weren't doing anything then. But let's say from 11 to 1, if there were no major events, the operator entry level could be handling the phones, and the operator 2 could be taking and doing this and putting some of this data into these spreadsheets. Also, during the overnight hours, we were able to do some of that, and but I couldn't ever say it has to be done tomorrow because we weren't sure what their shift would bring. So they knew when the deadline was, and they would just work incrementally to get that done. If they couldn't, they would let us know, and somebody else would help, which that didn't happen that often. The ATMS software that we're using is developed by Southwest Research Institute. It's a tri-state, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont system. It's New England Compass.
All right. And I think we have one more question, and then we're going to move on to John. I think Michael says, how many linear miles of roadway are you watching? Do we know?
So our cameras are just on the interstate systems, and it's not full coverage, but they are watching speeds on all of the roads in New Hampshire. I think it's 9,600 maybe, but they are mainly looking at the interstate.
All right. We'll save the rest of the questions as they come into the chat box or after the presentation. Susan, thank you very much. I think we're going to move now to John's presentation from Ohio. Sound like a plan?
All right. Sounds good to me, Denise.
All right. There you go. Take it away, John. Thank you, Susan. Thank you.
So thank you to Eric, Denise, Susan, for the great introduction. I think you're going to hear some similarities here from Ohio's perspective that you heard just now. So I'm going to dive right into it. I have a little bit of an outline. First, I'm going to talk very quickly on why we are interested in building a TSMO dashboard, kind of what has stemmed out of our TSMO plan recommendations. And then I'm going to step back on number 2 and go through our existing performance measures, of which there are many. I will go through some of them, not all of them, but I think you'll see a similar story where we have kind of progressed from a lot of manual activity-based performance measures, and then I'll show a couple samples of some more outcome-based performance measures. But I think one common theme throughout will be the fact that we have taken action on both types of performance measures. And then I'll kind of get back into it with what are we planning to do as far as a warehouse, and what exactly do I mean by a warehouse, and then how that's going to roll into a TSMO dashboard. So I will dive right in. First, our TSMO plan. So just earlier in 2018, ODOT formally adopted our first TSMO program plan, of which there were 7 or so briefs. And one of those briefs was a performance measures brief that introduced and recommended 20 performance measures to oversee all of our TSMO strategies and technologies. And many of these performance measures would be new and would take a decent amount of time for us to both develop and maintain. So with that in mind, and we've always had interest in showing a dashboard, which was also recommended as part of our policy action brief, to develop a TSMO dashboard, an interactive dashboard that brings some of the real-time data that we have together and allows us, instead of just looking backwards, historically, how are we doing, let's also in real time or near real time compare all of the measures that we're interested in, travel times and incidents and everything else, weather, work zones. So keep this recommendation in mind. It will kind of fit into the overall story, but we basically have reached a breaking point with what we're able to manually do. And just for a little bit of context on Ohio's program, we are very similar to New Hampshire. We have centralized operations in Ohio, oversee all 6 major urban areas in Ohio: Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Akron, Canton, Toledo, Dayton. You can throw Youngstown in there with Akron and Canton as well. And we do that all from a centralized operations. Same with our ITS program. A lot of our TSMO strategies and technologies are all managed, for the most part, centrally. Okay, so let me step back and dive into some of the measures that we have done historically. This is similar to what you saw previously, but we do measure some activities from our TMC. And so you'll see, hey, here's a fiscal year. We had how many incidents did we measure and track through our TMC. You can see it up on the top there, month by month. You can see region by region. I thought the question in the chat box earlier was, how do you kind of how are operators responding to this type of data being tracked? So they don't actually do the data tracking themselves, but they definitely see the reports. And interestingly enough, as soon as we started tracking it, the number of incidents went up. And they were very interested in almost treating it like a competition. Well, my region will get more incidents than your region. So that was an interesting side effect, just to note. Also there in the bottom right, TRIPS managed. TRIP is Ohio's Towing and Recovery Incentive Payment Program, similar to other state programs, where we pay heavy tow companies an incentive payment to quickly clear the roadway. And if they do it within 90 minutes, we give them $2,500. And so this again, the measure you see here on this snapshot of this report is just an activity. How many trips did we have? How many payments did we make, right? Just simply how many and how much, and it doesn't get into benefits, it doesn't get into anything but just tracking them. Okay, so that's some from our Traffic Management Center. Another program that is ran through our Traffic Management Center is our Freeway Safety Patrol. Again, here's another snapshot of what a report would look like. You get types of stops, quantity of stops. What's your most frequent incident type? How many of your assists are accident related? Are we assisting in incident clearance? Or how many of them are just motorist assistance? Again, region by region breakdown. So just again, more numbers. This is manually run every month, and along with it, each region gets a heat map. The reason I bring up this heat map is it has many times caused us to reroute our operations, change the beats for our freeway safety patrol trucks. And when you find that you have a lot of activity in one area and maybe not so much in another area, we just fine-tune the limits of our program. So this report many times has caused us to take action on our freeway safety patrol. Another nice side effect that we recently passed here in Ohio, since we've begun tracking, just a couple months ago, we passed the 500,000th assist for a motorist in the state of Ohio. That was a nice, again, we would not have known that if we weren't tracking. We always have a cumulative ongoing track, and we saw we were getting very close to that 500,000 mark, and it got ODOT and our operations program a lot of positive press. Many news sites across the state covered this story, came in and interviewed both our traffic management center and some of our freeway safety patrol. Question from Alan: the safety patrol program is a contract managed through ODOT, but it is separate. It is not ODOT employees. It is managed through ODOT. We've hired a company, AutoBase, right now that runs the program, whereas our TMC operators are ODOT staff. But again, this is an example of what you can see, a benefit of tracking the data that we didn't even see coming. Okay, one other one now. Now I'm kind of working into from just activity to more outcome. We're kind of making that transition now. This is probably, the screenshot is probably familiar to some. It is a snapshot of RIDIS, and what we've done is we've overlaid this. I mentioned our TRIP program earlier. One of the things that folks are very interested in, our incident management team, is how are we doing, how are those trips impacting traffic? And so you can see, let me see if I can draw on here. You can see these black lines. These are different steps in the trip timeline. So it starts, when did we first notice that we were going to have a trip, and we called the tow company. Hey, there's an incident with a heavy vehicle. We need you to respond to this incident. And then here's when the tow company arrived. Here is when the clearance started, and here was when the trip was complete. And the entire time, of course, you can see the traffic being impacted and the queue backing up in this direction, and then of course dissipating throughout here as the clearance activities take on. So it's a nice way to see how are we impacting traffic during this trip incident. That's just one example of where you're trying to see, okay, now this is an activity, but it's also an outcome to the motoring public. Okay, one last measure I'll show here before I show a little dashboard that we have. This is for work zone mobility. Full disclosure, we borrowed this from Indiana, and so that you may have seen this from them. We think it's great. We use it for all of our high impact work zones. We call it a volcanogram for obvious reasons. Sometimes it turns itself into a volcano. And what we're seeing here is each different color is month by month, how the bigger the area, the more hours traffic is experiencing under 35 miles an hour average speeds. So the bigger the blob, the slower traffic has been. And then as you move from left to right, these are the limits of the work zone. This is the start of the work zone. This is the end of the work zone. And you can see this red line is how was traffic flowing through this area before we ever opened this work zone, and then 2 years before. So the couple years before, we put a line on, and then you can see instances like this, preceding the zone in this direction, we have definitely made traffic worse. It used to be only this many hours under 35. Now we've, looks like, at least gone fourfold worse. And every month, this changes. So sometimes you'll just get 1 month where it's bad, but in a case like this, it looks like every month has had an issue. So that's something where we can quickly identify, okay, we're impacting traffic. What's going on here? Is there something we can do different with our configuration, with our signing, with et cetera? Is there something, there's an accident problem we need to be concerned about? And then we've taken many different actions based on these reports. They're distributed to our district work soon teams. Okay, now I would like to take a little bit of time and show another outcome-based performance measure that we've kind of turned into a dashboard. So Justin, I would like to share my screen if possible. All right, hopefully this is working. So what you see here, I'll explain this a little bit. We have a measure that we track that combines both speed data and weather data. And it measures our performance when winter weather comes in and we get enough winter weather, enough snow, that it reduces speed for the traveling public. That means we have a significant enough snowstorm that it has brought speeds below where it normally would be. Then we say, hey, we are having a snow event. It is then ODOT's job to clear that traffic, clear that roadway, get traffic speeds back to normal expected speeds. So basically we say, okay, let's use weather data and speed data. Let's see when an event starts. Let's wait till the snow stops. Now we're on the clock. It stopped snowing. Now we've got to get the routes recovered. And we give ourselves a goal of 2 hours to recover speeds back to normal. Right? So we use speed data to kind of track, okay, here's the data that here's the expected speed and here was our measured speed. And so what we do is every month we turn this into a dashboard. So each of these green cards that you see, these are a different month. April 2018 was the last time we had significant snow in Ohio. And you can see each district, here's how many routes you had on the clock. Here's how many routes you had recover within 2 hours. And so this district one up here on top, they were 12 for 12. They got 100% goal. They met their goal. And in District 4, that's our Akron area in this case, they only met 11 out of the 13. So 2 of the routes took longer than 2 hours to recover. And so they got an 85%. But then they can dive in a little bit. Let me just open up one of these. I'll click on District 7 for March. And they get a little more detail on that snow event. So you can see all the events that happened during the month of March in District 7. District 7 is our Dayton area in western Ohio. And they can see, okay, I can slide through here from the first of the month all the way through to the end of the month. And every 5 minutes you get a new tracker, and the map is saying, hey, here's which routes at this specific time speeds were below where they should be, right? And then you can click on a specific event. Let me look at this March 13th event. And here I am in Logan County. And looks like I had 2 routes that were on the clock, Logan 33 and Logan 68. And so then I can click on Logan 68 and I can say, okay, how'd I do? The event started snowing at 15 o'clock and speeds were affected. At 2010, it stopped snowing, which means we had 2 hours until 2210 to get speeds back to normal. And it took us 30 minutes. We got it recovered by 2040. So we met the goal, right? We said it was in 30 minutes. Now these ones are red, as you probably guessed, it took longer than 2 hours. So here we are in Miami County. For reference, Miami County is just north of Dayton, and 75 goes right through here. So you're going from Dayton to Toledo. In Miami County, on March 8th, let's click on 75, the interstate. It was supposed to recover by 3 o'clock, it stopped at 3 o'clock. It's supposed to recover at 5. It looks like the speeds did not recover until 6:10, so 190-minute recovery. And then our maintenance managers can click on this route image and say, okay, here's the specific segments of roadway that took the longest to recover. This is what held up recovery the longest. So you can see it was probably mostly the southbound direction, but a little bit northbound, right here just south of Troy. They can get a better idea of what might have happened there. Okay, so this is kind of all the results up top. Here's the results that your district got. Down below, we tie in the resources. So we track, okay, results, resources. Here's what it took, county by county, to get these results. And when I say resources, I mean man hours. How many overtime hours did you drive when you were plowing snow? How many trucks were out? How many gallons of brine did you use? How much salt did you drop, etc. And then at the very bottom of this report, the district can actually give us feedback. So that example on March 8th, on the Miami 75 event, the Ohio State Highway Patrol reported a semi-involved crash around 3:30 in the morning, which they found out was actually a fatal accident, unfortunately. So because of that, we really wouldn't be expected to be able to recover speeds with there being a fatal accident in an investigation. So they can kind of throw in their 2 cents as to why that was really a little bit out of our control. Okay, I can stop sharing that, Justin.
Hey, John.
Yep.
Question for you. Is this dashboard that you built, is it an internal dashboard that's used by your personnel, or is it a public-facing dashboard as well, for particularly the snow and ice?
Yeah, great question. The snow and ice dashboard has historically, we've been running this for 4 or 5 winters now. It has been an internally focused dashboard. There are discussions going on right now with our maintenance managers. We're very likely going to make this a public, or maybe remove just a little bit of data, but then make it a public-facing, kind of for accountability and transparency and that type of stuff. So at this moment, it is internal, but very soon we would likely expect it to be public-facing before this next winter.
Before you go on, there are a couple questions in the chat box I'm wondering if you might be able to address. Catherine had asked, in what other ways does ODOT utilize RIDIS for performance measures? Because I'm sure that congestion scan, for those of the folks on the phone that know RIDIS, that just was like, whoa, we know what that is.
Yeah, Catherine, that's a great question. That would probably be a very long answer. Shout out to Michael. I think I see he's on here. We use their tool a lot. We use both the trend maps, congestion scans, all of it. We use it for many different performance measures, many ad hoc studies. A trend map we find very useful for ad hoc. Hey, we're trying to close a lane here, just so happened an incident did that. Let's analyze it. A lot of the other reports you saw, like the work zone report, or even some of our travel time performance measures, all of that starts with us going into RIDIS and downloading data, if nothing else. So we do utilize RIDIS for a number of our performance measures and ongoing just data analysis. As far as how uniform our districts, that's a good question. So our urban areas have fairly homogeneous traffic patterns as far as population size and as far as just the way the freeways are laid out. We're fairly lucky in Ohio. Like Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati are in the ballpark of each other when it comes to traffic patterns. They're not the same, but they're very similar. And then a lot of our other districts are, besides the major urban, the rural areas are very rural. But when it comes to like the snow and ice performance, that's something that ODOT takes seriously no matter which district you're in. Recovering snow and ice is a top priority for the department. How do you define when a snow event starts and when it ends? Good question, Mark. We have a one-pager I can distribute on this, but basically it's when a certain percentage of the county routes are detecting a slowdown. So something like at least 25% of the routes in your county that you consider priority are at least 10 miles an hour below where they should be, while at least 40% of the weather stations in your county are experiencing some sort of precipitation that's winter weather, icy, snow, etc. So basically, that's a really wordy answer, but if it's snowing enough to impact traffic significantly in your county, the event has started. And then when you go back across that 40% threshold, meaning the snow is starting to die down, then you're off. You're going to say, okay, the snow event has ended, and now we're on the clock. Now we need to get our recovery efforts. And there's other factors in there, like some wind. Winds also need to die down. We also, if another event happens to start briefly after, we just combine them in the program later. So, but in general, is it snowing enough to screw up traffic? And then when does that snow die down? Then you're on the clock. That's the short answer. Good question. Okay, I will dive in and keep this going. One other outcome-based, of course, this isn't new to anybody, but travel time and reliability is a big part of any TSMO program. This is a sample report of our what we call travel time performance. So what percentage of the time do can motorists experience free flow speed or very close to free flow speed. And you can see we give it route by route. We show another heat map, which areas held you down. Then we give a big score up at the top. And then we also give it score by day of month. And here's when, so it looks like on this day, and then the 9th, I'm guessing we had a snowstorm or a major accident or something. So just some snapshots from that report. But what are some of the lessons learned from all of these reports we've done? First and foremost, they take a lot of time. Most of those reports we've been doing for years, and we've been doing, at least at the beginning, they've been very manual for us. I will say computer-savvy employees enjoy them. We have a number of, I mean this in a very endearing way, we have a number of nerdy engineers in our group who enjoy analyzing data and making reports. They are civil engineers with a more technical bend, and that has become very helpful. They do help us make decisions. I want to make that clear. There's a number of our programs over the years, just by having these reports, it has spurred on discussions with administrators, managers, TMC supervisors, even assistant directors as we develop and tweak our programs. They definitely help create a business case, especially when we pair it with the TOPS BC tool, and you start to track what kind of impact are we making. Even the activity-based, here's what our TMC did last year. Here's why this is important. Here's what our freeway safety patrol has done. It really helps sell the programs. And automation is nice. We move more and more towards automation as we go forward. It definitely helps with the man hours, and we definitely, we don't want to do it manually forever. So we automate as much as we can. Okay, I really quickly want to talk about what we are planning to do with all of this data in the future. So now I'm going to kind of stop talking about what we've done, and I'm going to very quickly cover what we are doing moving forward. One that I would like to highlight is what we call our TOAST tool. If you're familiar with the safety programs that most DOTs have, they tell you where all the crash problems are, and they give you a priority routes, right? Ohio has this. I'm sure many other safety programs have this. TOAST is basically that same question, where are your problems, except not based on safety, based on TSMO and operations data. So we are about to release our first version of this, and it's a mix of, here's the different data types, travel times and congestion and clearance, and how quickly do we clear crashes, what are your volumes. So there's a lot of things that go into it that answer the questions from an operations perspective. How is this route performing? And then it kind of, I'm not going to go through the tool itself, but it kind of ranks your corridors, and it says, here's your worst performing segment of roadway. So this is the way we plan to use this data. Just wanted to throw that out there. It will help us then do TSMO strategies and projects. Also, we are building a warehouse. We decided as soon as we saw that TSMO plan recommendation, we were going to rip off the Band-Aid and build a data warehouse instead of continuing to add more and more performance measures. We're going to get all of this data in one place. All that same data that feeds TOAST, all the same data that feeds those performance measures reports I went through, we're going to put it into one big warehouse. And we started building that. You can see the green. Let me get my arrow again. All the green over here, it took us about a year, a little bit more than a year, to design a model. And it started September 2017. We finished it, it looks like here, June of this summer. Right, so not even quite a year. So we went through and we built we modeled our warehouse. What data do we want in here? Where does the data currently sit now? What format is it in? What conversions do we have to make? And now we're in the building phase. We are building this warehouse. And the warehouse the first version of it will be released later this year. And it will allow us to automate, one-click button type of automation through queries and whatnot on a lot of those one-page reports you saw earlier. We'll be able to do that much quicker. And then we're starting very quickly to plan what we call a cube, or a visualization layer that goes on top of the dashboard. And then sometime next year, we will have that visualization piece, which is shown in magenta. So this is kind of a timeline we put together to help us explain what we're doing with this warehouse. So you need all of this to happen before we can have that interactive visualization piece on top. So it's kind of like a step back before you step forward. You take a little bit of time to build this. We've got a lot of data going into it. Let me give you some context. Here's what this warehouse looks like. It is a cloud-based system. It's the first of its kind for the department here. It is definitely the largest data warehouse for ODOT. It's 49 terabytes large, which is big for our IT department. It has 9.8 billion rows of data. When you mix in so much real-time data for a few years, it adds up pretty quickly. It's housing both internal and external data, and there's 62 total tables within it. So it's just to give you some idea of size of this warehouse. And then, unfortunately, I don't have anything to show what we want our dashboard to look like because we're busy into building the warehouse. But the dashboard that will be built on top of this warehouse, we know we want it to be interactive. We want to be able to compare month to month, route to route, et cetera. We want it to be, of course, based on real-time data and historical, and like I said, built on top of that data warehouse. So that is our current plan, and that is my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, John. That was great. I see someone typing in the chat box right now. I think what I've heard today, and I always work in takeaways, if I can say that, from New Hampshire, I heard a lot of discussion about how they engage their TMC operators in data collection, which I think many times is a unique and a novel idea. Not everybody does it, not everybody can do it, but they've been able to effectively manage to do that as they developed some consistency and some standardization in reporting, and now they're moving to automation. I think I heard that from both stories, automation from New Hampshire, automation from Ohio in terms of your data warehouse to your dashboard. The chat box has a couple questions in it for you. It says, Eric Hills, to all presenters, how are these PMs being shared and used in your MPO TSMO programs? Susan or John, do you have any comments on that?
I just posted that we share a lot of the underlying data that we use to generate these performance measures. We share it with most of our MPOs. They're very interested in getting their hands on the same data and running similar, especially reliability types of performance measures. So the data that we have ultimately gets shared out with most of our MPOs. I will also add that oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we do the same thing. We share our data with the MPOs. We also meet with them and look at specific performance measures along their corridors of interest.
Okay. Peter Rafferty has a question. His comments are, we've heard about counting reporting primarily just activity and output, but these generally fail the if we measure this, what will you do with it test. So what are you working on or advise us towards prioritizing goals and improving focus on result measures that really drive performance measurement or drive performance improvement? And also he mentions good points made about activity versus outcome. And he really likes the routes being recovered within 2 hours. It's a great measure. So would each of you like to address that a little bit? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll very quickly address this, Peter. Great question. Clearly, you've thought a lot about this over the years, and one of the things we're focused on here at Ohio as far as driving actual improvements because of these performance measures, that's something we've been thinking about a lot. And now let me expand on that TOAST story very briefly. The reason we're creating this TOAST tool to bring all these measures together, it will allow us to then compare routes. And when we can compare routes, and one of the things we're working towards, or even would advise others to work towards, is then what expected benefits do we do? So if we have a congestion problem and we're going to implement a variable speed limit or a hard shoulder running or some sort of strategy or add more surveillance or do more incident management training, whatever, if we implement a TSMO strategy because the data and the performance is telling us there's a problem here, the piece we're trying to figure out right now is what is the expected benefit, and then we can drive the benefit cost.
Denise, I just want to add on to
and put money behind these projects. That's really what we're focused on.
I just want to add on to what John is saying.
Is taking these to the next level.
I just want to add on to what John is saying and just point out the fact that, you know, for years, I've worked with people who have done performance reporting, but haven't been able.
Reasonable expectation when these measures are implemented because of that data. That's where we're thinking right now.
And this is Susan.
Go ahead.
To use the performance reports created to affect how they do business. And what John is demonstrating and what Susan demonstrated is that now with the combination of bringing it up through, maturing it up through the process,
This is Susan. The one additional thing that we are doing is we have the I-95 corridor, and there is talk about some different strategies to address the congestion there. Shoulder running, ramp metering, what should it be? So we are looking at our, we actually through the weekend are recording the traffic speeds through there visually, so we can see where those congestion points are. Instead of just hearing about it, we are watching it through the entire weekend in a recording that then you can fast forward or rewind. And we are looking at what the operators are doing for posting message boards, travel times, unplanned events. And every Tuesday, we are scraping that and looking, was there an incident that caused this? Where did this stem from? Did we post boards? What did the travel time say? And we can watch the congestion if it flows onto the neighboring streets. And then we're going to be taking that data and looking at what strategy we should be using along the I-95 corridor. The other piece that we're doing with the user delay cost that I mentioned towards the end of my presentation is we're looking at that through a corridor through downtown Concord along I-93. Should we be doing a widening project there? What is the delay? Should this be a shoulder running? What is the real benefit, and what is it really costing the users right now? And what are our different options that we can do when we have a message board or a camera, or we have an unplanned incident and we're watching how the police are moving the vehicles out from the road first? What is that doing to the queue? But we're just getting to that point of being able to visually see that. So now we're starting to look at what did we do in this unplanned incident? How effective was it?
Okay. Any other questions? I'm looking in the chat box right now. Thank you guys. Those are great answers. It's interesting because over the years, people talk about performance measures, and it's almost like it's the last piece of the cycle to get done in a cradle-to-grave type of a ITS to TSMO operational process. The concept of starting with something as basic as activity measures, and then learning to create something that is repeatable and standardized, and then automating it such that you get the same consistent data. As you start to do that year after year, you start to see trends, and as you start to see trends, you can start to select and set targets. So I think that one of the key pieces people miss sometimes is that you have to start with an activity many times to get to an outcome. And otherwise, it's really hard to just start at an outcome level. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's a key piece to the performance measurement struggle when we have with TSMO strategies.
Denise, someone had asked how many operators we have on duty regularly when they're doing these pulling this activity data. One thing to note is we compare the number of operators that we have on duty and time of day to the percent that they are meeting the 1201 FHWA requirements. And we are using that information to help us build our own bureau and build our own staff by looking at the number of operators that are needed at any given time based on the performance of meeting the 1201 rule.
Okay. I see some more questions or some more typing in the chat box. Quick question for both of you. For when it comes to work zones, John, the work zone piece that you showed, which you attributed to Indiana, I know that up and down the corridor, we use the concept of R&D heavily, which is rip off and duplicate, so that if you see something that works and can use it, it's helpful. Is that program that was developed for your road and weather operations, was that built in-house by your folks, or was it consultant-based? The dashboard?
Yeah, we have to give credit to Darcy Bullock and his team for the work zone one. But as far as the snow and ice little dashboard that we have, that one was built internally. We built that with our own staff, and we've got a couple folks with web development skills and some other stuff. So we put that together ourselves.
Okay. Michael Ray has in the chat box a question. Is anyone looking into more multimodal performance measures, like for bicycle connectivity or pedestrian accommodations on your end?
My group is not.
We are not right now. We've talked about it, but we haven't had any movement on it yet.
Okay. All righty. Well, I think, Justin, my screen, can we go back to the slides? There we go. Okay. I believe at the end of this right now, I'll wait and if we do have more questions in the chat box, I'll be glad to bring them up. But I do want to make sure that you guys at this end of this here see the contact information on the screen. Eric's contact information, Susan's and John's. Please feel free to reach out to them for more information. Go to New Hampshire's dashboard. If you find that this type of a webinar, this is the first one of this fiscal year where the coalition is trying to, for lack of a better term, drill down deeper into getting to some specific programs and some specific folks and showcase what they're doing. If this is what you want to see, please let me know, because we will continue to work in this vein. I think that it's important that we're looking outside the corridor as well as inside the corridor to showcase some of the programs and how they've progressed over the years. Okay, so I would look forward to any sort of email or comment. We would definitely appreciate it. It looks like we're going to end early. I don't. Unless anybody else has anything to add. Oh, I see someone else possibly still typing. Nope, Nick said, thanks for a great presentation. John, do you have any web pages or resources describing ODOT's efforts? John, you do. I know you do.
Yeah, we do. And if Nicholas, you send me an email, we can give those to you.
Also, this presentation, the presentations will be, as well as some of the Q&A, will be posted up on the Coalition website. Anyone participating will get an email or a link to let you know that those are up there. You can go get that information there. John, I may reach out to you for some of your business plans as well. Susan, I may reach out to you as well for sample